This is my second edition of taking a geographical look into the African diaspora. For those of you who aren't familiar with the African diaspora, let me define it for you. It basically means people who are dispersed from Africa. Last week, we took a look at the post-colonial world of Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, which was set in Umofia, Nigeria. This week, we dive into Black Cuban, Black American, a memoir by Evelio Grillo. It's the 1920s, and young Evelio is born in Ybor City, Cuba, but went to school in Tampa, Florida. As far as he can remember, white Cubans and black Cubans lived apart from each other, in Cuba and in the States. And so it got me thinking, what were some outstanding differences that he noticed? One, Cubans obviously spoke Spanish and practiced Catholicism, while Americans obviously spoke English and practiced Christianity. Two, when going to school, he was simply labeled black, not Afro-Cuban. This negation was, I think, one of his motivations of reconstructing his identity. Let's take a deeper look into how his cultural background wasn't even taken into consideration when he lived in the States. He points out the lack of acknowledgement in ethnically diverse Latinos in this quote. A glance at a present-day government form or loan application with racial categories such as white, non-Hispanic, black, non-Hispanic, and Hispanic seems to confirm that neither whites nor blacks can be Hispanic, regardless of their national origin, cultural heritage, or ethnic affiliation. Evelio felt the pressure of which culture to identify with. However, you'd like to think that he fit right in with African Americans such as myself, but no. They were the main ones calling him names at school like Tallywop and Grasshopper. Now in 2016, those names sound crazy, but it's the 1920s and those names hit hard. So already, we're noticing that Evelio is confronted with this double consciousness. W.E.B. Du Bois mainly describes this double consciousness in the duality of being black and American. Obviously for Evelio, this double consciousness is between being Cuban and being black while living in the United States. And he's not the only one who's confronted with this reality. Here's a video of a young woman who shares a similar disposition of being Afro-Latina.
We had two different experiences. She grew up in the Caribbean. She grew up in Puerto Rico.
Right.
So she had access to this thing, to this cultural identity that I didn't.
Yep.
So I struggled with that. So growing up and calling myself Spanish was completely inaccurate because I'm not Spanish. I'm Spanish speaking.
Yes.
But I am Dominican, and that's something that I had to learn along the way.
Right.
Everyone else around me also thinks of it as Spanish,
right?
You know, and
but it's something that even Dominicans here and Puerto Ricans here would identify as. Though you could ask them, "Yo, are you Spanish?" Yeah, I'm Spanish.
For the sake
that's
of
the problem
for
with
the sake of
anti-blackness.
for the sake of oversimplifying things.
Yes, it was oversimplifying things.
What is anti-blackness though?
It's training you to say, let me separate myself from my actual community. Let me say I'm Dominican. Let me just say I'm Cuban. Let me just say I'm Puerto Rican. As opposed to saying I'm Afro-Latina. Like there is part of my identity that comes from my lineage.
That's a political act.
It's absolutely. Being a person of color
act.
is a political act and it's revolution. But like
it's
like the fact that you were to say, there are parts of you that might remind me of Rachel. I'm like, why? Because I'm fair-skinned? That has nothing to do with the lineage I come from. My dad is a black man in the world. I was raised by a black man in the world. My mom is a light-skinned Puerto Rican woman. I am of color in any group.
At the root of their experiences lies the desire to be who they are meant to be without restrictions or consequences. Overall, I think a huge part of what makes Evelio both Afro-Cuban and African-American is the fact that he took the path to self-discovery. Something I think every black person should do. Ultimately, this memoir is a reminder to Evelio that he took the time to retrace his steps to find his true identity. This has been The Black Curriculum.
My Tinder running, no, I had to go and soften the meat. I throw a slab on the pan and watch it pop on the grease. I said I am what I am, I feel the tension increase. You say I'm just like my dad, I can't disagree. It's just the simplest thing.